Hello everyone. In this video I want to talk about tables in MATLAB, which is basically a type of data that MATLAB added several years ago, and it is kind of like a mix of structures and matrices. It's an interesting data type where you can store heterogeneous type of data, okay? So just like structures, right, or cells, you can store different types of data like strings, characters, numbers, logical arrays, anything. And not only you can access it using the parts of it, like the rows of it or anything, using the dot operator. You can also access it by like the regular indexing that we had for matrices, like specific row, specific column, or so many rows and so many columns and so on. So it's an interesting type of data. And another thing it has, you can also store metadata with it. Okay. So let's talk about this table, how to create it, how to modify it, display it, and read and write table, and so on. So here I have three people, Ron, Joe, and Tim. And for these three people, person 1, 2, 3, I have basically two sets of variables, age and height. Okay, and then using the name, age, and height for these three people, so I have three variables, I'm going to make a table. Okay, so I use the command table and pass to it name, age, and height, which you can see one of them is cell, two of them are arrays, and pass it to the variable t. So if I go ahead and run this portion, you can see that now T is created. You see it's a 3 by 3 table, and here that's the table. As you can see, you see it has three columns, name, age, and height, right? So that's the table. Now this table has properties which I can access using t.properties. So I say, hey, show me the properties of this table, and it says, hey, there is no description to it, user data. The name of the dimensions is called row and variable. The name of the variables themselves are name, age, and height, right? Okay. And then the rows don't have name, variable continuity, units, variable description. These are all metadata, except for these row names that you can see on the table. The rest of them, when you add, basically you are not going to see them on the table. So you can store a lot of more things with the table. Let me show you. For instance, you say, hey, t.properties.row names, this guy. I want to add descriptions for the rows, and I want to call them person 1, person 2, and person 3. Okay, so I add that. So now my table's rows should have names to them, as you can see here, right? You see, P1, P2, and P3, I added them, and I can see them. And maybe I add some units to the variables, right? So maybe I add some units. So if I go down here, you see here I have variable units. I want to add some units to the variables. And the variables I have, remember, is name, age, and height. So I guess I have to take this here. So the name has no units, and the age has years, and let's say the height here is centimeters. So I can add these for those variables, right? So now again, look, if I show you the table, it is not going to show these units I just added. You see, it just shows rows, columns, and the data. It doesn't show those units that I added, but if I want them, I can go to t.properties, right? And now look, this metadata variable units is added under the properties that I can get. Or let's say if I want to add description for the table, I can add it again. If I add and say, hey, t.properties.description, right? And I say maybe, for example, data for 3 people, something like that. Okay, and now again, look, if I show you T, you see that description is not there, but if I say T dot properties, look, you see that is added under description. So you can store metadata as well as heterogeneous data. So that's two of the powers of a table. Now, I told you that about the T and the T properties. Another thing you can do with a table is summary. There is this command summary that you can apply to a table, and that is interesting. So look, when you run that on a table, it says, hey, this is the description of the table. The variables are basically name, age, and height. As you can see, where the name is a 3x1 cell. The units, there is no units. The age is 3x1 double. The units are 8 years, and these are the values for it, where this is the min, this is the median, this is the max. And then the height is, again, 3x1 double. The units centimeters, these are the value, mean, median, and max. So you see, this summary is a beautiful command. It's not going to show all of the things about it, but it is going to show the important things about it. Now, as I told you before, you can treat a date table like a structure or like a matrix. So first, let's take a look at the structure. So remember, T is this, and you have these rows and these columns. So now if I want to access the data in a specific column, a specific variable like name, all I need to say is T.name. And there we go. I got it. Or T.age. Look. I can get that. Or I can say, what is the average of the age of the people here? I say mean of T.age. You see, I can do that. So just like structures, I can use dot operator. Now you might say, can I access a specific row? Can I access a specific person? Like if I want the information for Ron, can I say T.P1? And the answer is no, you cannot. You see, because P1 is not really a variable, okay? So how can I access the information for the first person? Well, we can use what? We can use matrices, and that's how we can do it. So if I want like entire row 1, I say T what? Row 1 and all columns. Look, here we go. If I want the first 2 people, I say 1 column 2. If I want just the first 2 variables, name and age, I say what? I say all rows, but columns 1 and 2, you see? If I want, let's say, the first 2 people and the first 2 variables, not the last person, then I say 1, 2, and 1, 2. You see? There we go. So I can exactly treat it like a matrix. And this is the power of tables, that you can treat them in 2 different ways. Now, how can I add and remove rows and columns? Well, very easy, the same way that you did with matrices. So for example, let's say I want to add a 4th person here, like George, with his age and with his height. So I say T, row end plus 1, right? And all columns equals this. Right? Look here. See, George info is added. The only problem is this row 4, since I did not provide any name for it, it is automatically by the table called row 4. So now I can change the row names of the table and say, hey, call this guy P4. So now if I look at T, now it is properly called P4. Right? Now if I want to get rid of somebody, let's say I want to get rid of Tim, what should I do? I should say T of, for example, row 3, right? Person 3 and all columns equals what? Well, how did we get rid of something in matrices? We set it equal to empty brackets. That's what we did. Now look here, done. Team is gone. You see, as simple as that. And now probably you want to call your people 1, 2, and 3 again, not 1, 2, 3, and 4, right? Because person 4 is now changed to person 3. Okay. Now let's say you want to add a column. So you can say what? You can say, hey, the last column, plus 1 and plus 1 and all rows equals this, so you add some information to it. Let's say these are the weights of the people, and now if you look, it is added, but again, since you didn't give a name to that variable, just call variable 4. So if you want to give it an appropriate name, here you rename the variable names of the table under properties, and now if you do that, look here, you see, now it's changed to weight. Now if I want to get rid of age, then I say what? T of column 2 equals empty brackets. And now I get rid of all of the ages. See, so as simple as that, you can deal with deleting and adding rows and columns. Okay, finally, how to read and write tables. Well, you can read them and write them from and to text files, Excel files, and so on. So here, I'm going to read my data from an Excel file, sheet 1, and the range from B3 to E13, which is this here. Let's say I read this data, and then I read them into MATLAB. And like for what? Why would you do that? Maybe I want this data is for an analysis of variance two-way. So I bring them in and then pass these three variables of it, t1, .cold, and .hot, which are these three columns. I pass them to the built-in command ANOVA2 in MATLAB, and that gives me the significance level and the ANOVA table, both as a table and as a picture, and then I can do anything I want with it, right? So here I want to read this data into MATLAB into table T1. So I just run this command. Look here, as you can see, the whole set of data, everything is read into MATLAB. And now if I just pass these numerical values to ANOVA2, then I can get some data out of it, right? So here, you see, I passed this data to ANOVA2, and you see, it gives me the ANOVA table that I can save as a picture, and it also gives me that table variable that I can save somewhere, right? Or I can just put it in my presentation already. So I can read the data from Excel. Instead of XLS read, I can read them with read table. Or if I want to write something to somewhere, let's say here, this data that I read from the Excel file, I want to write it to a text file now. So I use the command write table, and this T1, I write it to this text file called ANOVA2data.txt, and for separating the variables, for delimiter, I use a space. Okay, so if I do that, now I can create a text file which has the data of table T1, and if I go there and show you, you can see that, there we go, look, the data of table 1 is added to this text file using a white space delimiter. So I can do read and write tables to communicate with Excel files and text files. So hopefully this video was useful to you and you learned about this variable type called table, which is quite a bit useful and powerful. Thank you so much for your attention. I'll see you in the next video.